to redo this video. So what I wanted to say was, it's on brown skin versus dark skin, and how some people have claimed that on TikTok, some people are claiming that brown skin doesn't exist, and that it's just another word for dark skin. I want to point out that they may be true and right in some cases, that brown skin is really dark skin. I do think that brown skin does exist. The problem is, because of the fact that a lot of people who are darker complected like to claim that they're brown skinned, it erases the other people who may align with being brown skinned, but when they see people like this being considered brown skin, there's no space for them to coexist with. See, people talk about the brown skinned experience, and it's different ideas of what happens when you're brown skinned. Like, for example, people will say brown skinned people might have more attention when it comes to dark skinned black men, but they're not preferred, basically. Um, is say that they are basically looked over for lighter skinned and mixed race people. Usually nobody's asking them if they are mixed race. Things of this nature are the exact same reason why, people like to say that brown skin is the same thing as dark skin. Honestly, I have some people posted, and I want to show something. You see the people who are of one hue, basically, and you see the people of the other hue. Now, a lot of people who claim brown skin will be the same individuals who look like the people next to the people who might be really brown skinned, but, next to the other people, the darker people, they look light skinned, and the people next to them look dark skinned. That's the thing. What's weird to me about the brown skinned category is this. How come, as a brown skinned woman, a light brown skinned woman, I used to identify as medium and brown, but like with the darker people identifying as brown and medium, there's no way I can fit. The reason why is because when I stand next to someone who is brown skinned, supposedly, I look light skinned. If I look light compared to someone who is brown, then how the heck am I brown too? How the heck am I the same color as a brown skinned woman? If the brown skinned woman is making me look bright, it makes no sense. But at the same time, you get called a colorist and racist if you tell that brown skinned woman that I kind of think you're dark skinned and I'm brown skinned. People start thinking you're self hating, you're hating them, you're being, unaccepting towards how they want to identify. So then you stop saying anything about them being brown skinned. You stop saying anything about them being medium, and you just say, okay, if you want to be medium, if you want to be brown skinned, go ahead. But with that in mind, what freaks people out, and I had this conversation once in November, where people were honestly trying to say Kelly Rowland was brown skinned, while also trying to include people like myself who are like Halle Berry's color as brown skinned. It's like, okay, if she's brown skinned, if um Kelly Rowland is brown skinned, then obviously she's not the same color as Halle Berry. If you want so badly to be the same color as Taraji P. Henson, it's not gonna make it so just because you called yourself brown skin. We can still see you, and we can still see Taraji P. Henson. We can still see Megan Z. Stallion, and we can still see Brandy. We can still see Kenya Moore, and we can still see Megan Good. We can still see Yara Shahide, and we can still see Gabrielle Union. So it is what it is, you know. Most of the time, when I deal with brown skinned people who want to be called brown skinned, but they're of a darker hue, it's like this. I feel uncomfortable with this because it's like the only time I'm ever your color, and for me, my skin does a whole lot for itself. Let's just be real. If you strip me naked in the middle of summer, you would understand my body does a lot of tanning, okay? It does a lot of tanning. It does very well for tanning, considering where it's coming from. Um, Even in that type of environment, the darkest I can get is in August, and I can get maybe slightly close to a Gabrielle Union's color. I can never get to a Kelly Rowland's color, no matter how hard I tan or how hard I try. I can't reach it. She's out of my league. How the heck am I supposed to see myself as the same complexion as someone who, in the middle of Vegas, being as tan as I can, I still can't reach their color? How can I see myself as the same color as someone who, even in the middle of a desert, I'm still not as dark as? If I was dropped in Africa, I still probably wouldn't be as dark as Kelly Rowland. So how are we the same color? I don't understand that. To me, it's like, oh shoot, my battery's running low. Give me a sec. But it's like, honestly, a lot of the time I feel like people want to see, you know, they want to see, people who are darker brown to be brown skinned. And, there were arguments as to why brown skin is darker. And I never really thought, I always thought that, okay, those are valid points. So to me, it was like, okay, they do make sense. They are technically brown skinned. Some arguments made for why darker skin is considered brown skin. Excuse me. It's things like the fact of being darker than a paper bag. Excuse me. A lot of the people that I'm posting that are lighter complected would pass a paper bag test. They just would. I know a lot of people don't like that fact, but they would pass a paper bag test. In fact, I will display a paper bag so people can see the paper bag's color and the people's color. So you understand, they would pass paper bag tests. Um, but then on top of it, it's just like three other reasons that brown skin I've seen were considered, darker complexions was because one, like I said, brown skin people, some people like to think that brown skin people are people who are darker than a paper bag. And if that was the case, then these people that I'm posting would not be considered brown skin, but the darker people among them that I'm posting would actually be brown skin. Another reason is the average complexion of a black person. Who is the average complexion of a black person? Is it the people that I'm posting that are mostly of a lighter caramellish brown, or is it the people who are of a darker brown? Honestly, I know a lot of black people wish it was a caramellish color, but the thing is, if black people were really normally that color, um, we wouldn't be called black. Just being completely honest. Let's be real. There's a lot of people that are actually that color who aren't even black. They're not even called black. They're Asians, they're Indians, there's maybe even Middle Eastern people, Native Americans definitely. Um Hispanic people and so forth, that have similar complexions to the lighter brown individuals. So obviously dark skin and the average complexion of a black person is much darker than a light brown person. Um, the second situation is not just the average, because if we do deal with the average in America, it would be darker than someone who is lighter brown or caramel or whatever we want to call most of the people on this slide. Um, but aside from that, is the people who are like they have this term kind of where red and reddish brown and red bone. We're specifically supposed to mean people who have a caramelish hue. There's a meat term for it. Basically, people who were a little bit lighter than average, which would basically be caramel, were considered red long ago. And things of that nature. So, I mean, like, that would kind of tell you that a brown skinned person would be darker than someone who's of a reddish brown hue. Those are the three reasons why I always thought that brown skinned people who are darker were right, that they are brown skinned. The problem with that is that um, they will try and say they're brown skinned, but then they will try and put their category as the same category as the more caramel complected people. And the thing is with that is just that that's where the hate kind of comes in to me. Um, like not really recognizing how dark you really naturally are. A 420 Fenty is not a 370 in Fenty. I'm sorry, they're just not the same. And I should know that. I mean, I do my bid in tanning, and I know very well they're not the same colors. So if you are naturally a 420, like a Gabrielle Union, and many of the people I've posted, um, you should understand aligning with someone who is a 370 in Fenty and is basically a light brown complexion. You're basically trying to delude yourself into thinking that you're the same color as a light brown skinned individual, who I think the term medium would be more appropriate for, or at least that's what I was raised to think those people are medium, and basically someone who's more like a 420 is a dark skinned individual. The two can't be the same complexion. They just can't. Look at them. One next to each other, one would be light, one would be dark. That's just how it is. In reality, I don't think they are. I just think the other one's a lot darker. So then that's why they make the others look light. You know, you stick these light brown skinned people next to yellow bones like Zendaya Coleman or Faith Evans or Tisha Campbell, and these people are going to look brown. They're going to look very strongly brown. They're not. They might not look, dark skinned per se, but they will look definitely brown. Brown skinned. So to me, I think obviously that's why people say brown skin doesn't exist, and brown skin is basically just a term for dark skinned people to call themselves so then they don't have to call themselves dark skinned. You see how this doesn't apply to the people I posted who are lighter brown complected, because they can't, like, if they walk around saying they're dark skinned, they will get a whole bunch of vitriol from dark skinned people, because dark skinned people are very aware they're not dark skinned. The thing is about that whole situation is dark skinned black people don't want to, admit that those people are light skinned. One, so they would love to rather call them brown skinned, kind of like as an insult, because that's often what's done to the lighter brown individuals, you know. And so that's why I feel like when people want to say that there's no such thing as brown skinned, I think maybe that's what they're addressing. Because honestly, when people are using descriptions on light brown skinned people, and it's an emergency, the dark skinned black people start to call them light skinned. For example, my own mother would say this to this one crazy guy we had to call the police on. And he was like Taraji P. Henson's color. My mother would normally just say, oh, it's a brown skinned person, a medium complected person. But she went and called him light skinned because she didn't want to admit, like, she wanted to get the right person, basically. But if she was normally talking, she would not want to admit that he was light skinned kind of situation. So, kind of like in some people's heads, that maybe they don't have an idea of anything in between where there's dark and there's light skinned. You know what I mean? Um, I think in some cases they kind of like have an idea that there's just dark and light, but then in their heads they still try and say that someone's medium for a certain purpose, you know what I mean? And it's not really like reality, of what they really think in their heads. In their head, I do think that some dark skinned people have a darker light mentality, but in their words, they'll try and say these people are all brown skinned in order to not acknowledge that they're light skinned, because they feel uncomfortable about that. The thing is about that, though, is the experience of the people I'm showing that are lighter brown and significantly lighter than the darker skinned brown people. The experience of those people is very different. And that's the thing. People always talk about colorism as a brown skinned woman. And I always ignore them mostly because it's like, you don't really understand my experience. You talk about, never being confused for lighter skinned mixed race people. You talk about basically, black men, dark skinned black men, basically saying you're not light enough or saying that you're brown skinned, things of that nature where like they make a distinction between you and light skinned black women. From my experience, I've seen how black men treat reddish brown black women as opposed to darker brown skinned black women. Darker brown skinned black women are treated like black women many of the time. They don't often get that question, what are you mixed with? As much as the reddish brown skinned black women do. They get it much more often. You know, they take more interest in the reddish brown skinned black woman. And I honestly think that if you pay attention to society and who gets most, when we talk about entertainment and with singers and actors, you see more people who are of the lighter brown hue than yellow bones or brown skins for that matter. That's just how it is. The reason for that with casting is so much easier to cast someone who's light brown because they can easily tan to something that's darker, or they can play a lighter mixed role as well. They have a very versatile perspective on their complexion because they don't specifically look like dark skinned black people, but they have the ability to tan almost as much as a dark skinned black person. Well, at least to a brown skinned black person's level. And many people don't notice that brown skinned people are even brown skinned. Many of the time they notice that they're dark skinned or they consider them dark skinned. My experience with people of other races, even, they usually understand that light brown is not the same color as dark brown. Now, they won't call light brown light skin. And I would agree with that. Yellow bones usually don't call people this color of lighter brown hues, caramelish hues, light skin. They don't. But they also don't usually call these people dark skinned. But they will call brown skinned people that claim they're brown skinned dark skinned. And I did this whole video on it, specifically where this person I was talking about, and to me, I'm like, if they see themselves as brown skinned, they'll go for people that are brown skinned. That's kind of obvious. And I stand by everything I said in that video. But many people were thinking, what do you mean Lil Wayne is brown skinned? He's dark skinned. Many of the people I was talking to thought he was dark skinned. Yet, he's another one who considers himself brown skinned. He is very similar in complexion to the people I posted. Compare, if you sit him next to someone like me, we're gonna look light skinned because he's so much darker. Now, the thing is, when we go out into the world among black people, honestly, I gotta be honest with you. Someone who's a lighter brown hue usually does look a lot lighter skinned in comparison to most of the black people around. That's just how it is. And I've seen this no matter what part of the country we're in. Basically, you see that the lighter brown skinned individuals look a lot lighter than the darker brown skinned individuals, the average black person. I think a lot of people don't want to look at the difference, but if you just open your eyes and look at random black people compared to light brown skinned people, you can even count it out. How often do you see someone who's light brown as opposed to the average black person's complexion? It's usually not as often. Now, I'm not saying it's like 1 in 20. If you count it out for a yellow bone, it's more like 1 in 20 for them. It's a very low level. I'm not saying that. But in a room of 30, you might have 4. In a room of 20, you might have like 3. You know, that's how it is among black people. I've noticed that most of them are not the color of these people, but at the same time, they want to pretend with themselves that they are, you know. And sometimes they like to lie to themselves and say, like, that they're not a reddish hue, or they're darker than a paper bag, or they're the same color as the average black person. But, like I said, if you just open your eyes, you'll actually be able to see the actual truth. And that's why I posted this slide, so then people can see the whole range of how light brown skinned people look as opposed to darker brown skinned people look, and how their experiences are going to be different. So, do I think, in closing, that brown skinned people exist? And does brown skin exist? Yes, it does. I think brown skin definitely exists. I just think that there's a lot of people who are darker who call themselves brown skin too. Now, they have reason to call themselves brown skin. Like I said, if you're saying the average complexion of a black person, it's relatively very dark. The average black person is very dark. So if we're gonna call that person brown skinned, medium skinned, average complected, I would say, well, factually, yes, they are. But you can't expect someone who's a lighter brown complexion to really align with that. That's the thing. For me, as a brown skinned, light brown skinned woman, I've never aligned with someone like that because I'm like, okay, if I align with them, I might as well align with someone who's a yellow bone. I mean, at this point, because I mean, like, the difference between them and me and a yellow bone, honestly, when I get to my natural complexion, like my natural complexion, I think I'm actually closer to a yellow bone than I am to a brown skinned individual. Because my skin is, I don't know, because like my body, like I said, is a lot lighter. And I've had white people see my body and notice that I'm a lot paler there. I wouldn't say my body is even yellow though, but I think that's the real definition of a pale brown. A lot of people like to say a pale brown is like, Whitney Houston's color or something. I would not consider Whitney Houston a pale brown. I would consider her a medium brown. To me, a pale brown is like when Rihanna has lost her tan. That's a pale brown complexion. And that's what my body's like, basically. If you look at her body's very light. Her face can get a little bit darker. And when I say very light, I don't mean light skinned, I mean very light brown. Anyway, so to me, it just never made any sense to me as a light brown skinned woman to see brown skinned people as the same, you know, kind of um, complexion as me. If I did that when I was looking for foundation, for example, I would be wearing basically blackface, which wouldn't be really wrong. I mean, like, I have used dark makeup in the past. I don't think I've used anything as dark as a 420, though, when I'm not tanned. If I do anything dark, I'll probably do like a 400 at the darkest, 390 in Fenty, something like that. Because my natural color in the desert in Nevada is 370. My natural color is like a 330 in the north, but I don't live in the north. So, anyway. But the point is, from my perspective, it's just like, I just think a lot of people don't really pay attention to obviously these two things are not the same thing. So their experiences are going to be different. On top of being just different, these people, are going to experience different things and they might relate with one side more than another. That's why brown skins are kind of indistinguishable from dark skins. But light brown skins are they have some commonalities with yellow bones as well, light skins. Now, the thing is, with light skins, and light brown skinned people, the thing is, many of the time, you'll see that when someone gets big, when someone gets famous, and they get success, they become light skinned when they're light brown. You won't find that with someone who's brown skinned. But when you're light brown skinned, if you are, successful or something goes well, you become light skinned and people start to say you have light skin privilege. You could see this with Beyonce, you could see this with Rihanna, you could see this with Nicki Minaj, and so many others. You could see this with Barack Obama, so many people, basically. And I think brown skin, honestly, with light brown skin, that's where you start to be considered a different complexion and a different appearance than dark skinned black people by other races. For example, a lot of the time I've noticed like white people will be like, oh, you're not as dark as that. They're not saying you're light skinned, like I said, but they're going to say you're not as dark as that. Now, do you think I don't really think they notice when someone is brown skinned or dark skinned. I don't. I think they think brown skin, dark skin is the same thing. Now, are we saying that they don't think that light brown skinned people are black people? Of course they know they are. They treat people who are very light skinned as black people. So I never understand why people are like, um, but the light brown skinned people are black. Everybody's black, dude. This is not about who's what race. Everybody's fucking black, okay? Heck, Steve Tyler was called the N word, and the man is 98% white. So, I mean, like, white people will call anybody black, okay? They will call anybody the N word. Depending on if they see one feature of you that looks black, and you have African ancestry, as Steve Tyler has like 1.5% black, but anyway, if it shows, they're going to go after you. No matter how little the percentage is, that's just how they are. But the point is, I'm not talking about racism here. I'm talking about as far as colorism and things of that nature. So that's why I'm like, I do think that brown skin does exist, but I feel like brown skin has always changed in terms. Sometimes people will use it, like I said, use it for light brown skin people to say, oh, you're not light skin. and then in the next breath try to make themselves brown skinned in order to not call themselves dark skinned. These are the people with the most colorism issues because they have some issue with being dark, and they think dark skin is an offense. If you call them dark skin, you're being colorist, supposedly. And that shows that they have a negative view towards dark skin. And then, some people are not like that. Some people will literally just call someone who is light brown, light skin, like the people I'm showing. And then they will just call the other people brown skin. Other people will call the light brown skin people brown skinned and the other people dark skinned. But either way, it's a changing thing. And the problem with that is that if it's changing, then other people won't really know what anyone is talking about. One, the experience of a brown skinned woman is always changing because it's a different perspective depending on the person because it's not the same person, it's not the same complexion, basically. So we don't even hold the same complexion as a commonality. So it's an ever changing experience. And then also, when you're light brown skinned, talking about your experience with colorism, saying that you benefit in any way triggers everybody, okay? It really does. It triggers the light skinned people, one, because especially if you're black, if you're a light brown skinned person who's mixed, you're more acceptable because they're like, okay, well, you have some mixed ancestry. They feel like. But the other way, they get upset because you don't have any mixture in you, yet you are able to get some of the things that lighter skinned people get as a benefit when it comes to dark skinned black men. And even in those cases, like I said, I don't see it as a benefit. But some mammies see that as a benefit, honestly, with dark skinned black men. And that's why I have exposed a lot of the time with light brown skinned women how they try to basically take that benefit and hide it from others and pretend it's not there. Some of them get caught, some of them are called out for it, and then others are ignored. Because it depends also, like, on different factors, basically. Because you can be light brown, and some people will still try and push you into the light skin category, even though you're the same color as someone else they're trying to push into the brown skin category. It just depends on the individual. Then also, like I said, with success, usually those people become light skinned, and then they supposedly have light skin privilege. Um, so I think a lot of the time, lighter brown skinned women are often, more often than brown skinned women, hushed and told to not speak on their experiences with colorism and colorist black men and self hating black men. So, you know, it's a really big. Oh, God. Sorry, my back kind of hurts. But it's a lot of different dynamics to the situation. But I just wanted to show how these people are obviously not the same as the other people. And putting these two people in the same category is always going to be a recipe for disaster because you're basically saying brown skinned people have this experience, brown skinned people speak for this, but then again, you have light brown skinned people who look nothing like these so called brown skinned people. So that's just my perspective on it. I don't care if brown skinned people are called dark or brown. I really don't. It's not my fight. I mean, it's not even my color or skin tone. But it's just, you know, as far as how I've always identified, I've always known, well, if we are talking in their language of calling them brown skinned, I can't call myself brown skinned. I can only call myself a light brown skinned woman because I don't want to call myself light skinned. That's the thing. I don't like to call myself light skinned because yellow bones don't, to me, look anything like me. When I look at myself, I don't see how someone like Tisha Campbell looks anything like me. But when I look at like myself, I would see how, for example, a Taraji P. Henson or a Nicki Minaj or a Rihanna or a Halle Berry all have a very similar caramel hue going on there, you know. And generally, when it comes to foundations, I tend to wear similar foundations to those type of women, like Yara Shahidi, Rihanna, Halle Berry, Nicki Minaj, basically. Um, and so I just feel like with people not paying attention to that, people ignore the fact that, we're not going to have the same experience, and we fall under the radar, basically. And it basically hurts dark skinned black women in the end because they're hoodwinked a bit. But honestly, I feel like with light brown skinned women, they kind of know, you know, but they don't want to know, you know, because it makes them feel uncomfortable. I feel like honestly, light brown skinned women make dark skinned black women feel the most uncomfortable. I also feel like that light brown skinned women make a lot of light skinned women uncomfortable. And brown skinned women for that matter. It's a really weird position to be in, honestly. That's why you find that a lot of light brown skinned women that I am showing don't like to talk about colorism because they fall in an area where no one really relates, one, and two, anytime you talk about your experience, you're triggering everybody. You're not just triggering somebody. Like when light skinned people talk about their experience, they might be triggering dark skinned people, but they're really not triggering someone who's light skinned or someone who's light brown skinned or other complexions. They're really just triggering darker skinned individuals. When a brown skinned person talks about their experience, for example, they, might be triggering someone who's light skinned, maybe, but they're not triggering someone who's a light brown complexion or a dark complexion, you know, or a brown skin complexion. Same with dark skinned people. So I feel like it's just the most uncomfortable position to be in, basically, when it comes to colorism. That's the main reason why I made this channel. Was because I feel like among light brown skinned people, we're just not really represented that much. And that's basically all I have to say. I just think, that light brown skinned people have their own category and brown skinned people aren't really included in that. So that's just my perspective. Thanks for watching, and bye.